Hello and welcome to the second video in choosing a main series. The goal of the series is to give you all the details related to builds, playstyle and leveling for each class so you can make an informed decision if you should start or switch to that specific class. This video will be focused on Engineer and all of its specs, and we will start with the core class. Engineer is a medium armor class with a decent HP pool compared to Thief, and this makes it a bit more sturdy when you take some damage. The medium armor also helps, but the main power of the Engineer are the kits. There are 7 kits available and each kit has an extra 5 skills available, which makes the class very appealing. However, the leveling experience is not that good, as you'll have just a few weapons available and the damage is low compared to other classes. So honestly, I would recommend that you use a level boost or Tomes of Experience to skip to level 80 if you have them available or if you have already leveled another character. At level 80 the experience is better, since you can focus on the build type and adjust your gear based on that. But try to not stay too much on the core class if you have any expansions, because all the elite specs are better. And as for the builds, I would recommend the power build, since you can easily transition into the elite specs from there. Now for the playstyle. The engineer class mechanics is the tool belt, which adds a secondary skill above your weapon skills on what you select in the heal, utility and elite slots. But keep in mind that those skills are not as powerful as the main ones, but can be very useful in different situations. If you want to see the build that I used in open world for the core class, you should see it on the screen now. If you have access to Heart of Thorns expansion, you'll also gain access to the Scrapper Elite spec. Scrapper is quite versatile, since you can play it both as heal and DPS support with the quickness boon. But you can also play it as a full power DPS, and it is decent enough without a build that is too complicated. The complicated part, however, is when you try to play it as a quickness support. Because to generate quickness, you need to use the combo field mechanic, and you need to use either a blast or a leap finisher inside the combo field, and this can be quite daunting for a new player. But if you are set on playing Scrapper, you will get used to it pretty fast. As for the weapons available, you have the hammer, which is really good for what it does, and if you have Secrets of the Obscure, you also have access to the short bow for Engineer, which is actually useful for one build or two, and one of them is Heal Scrapper. But if you want to use it as a DPS or ranged DPS, you should just use Rifle. It's better and simpler to use. Now for the spec mechanics, Scrapper uses gyros, and instead of the elite belt skill that would change based on your elite skill, now you have the function gyro, which is very good for support, because you can revive down players with it, but also use it as a source for protection. If you want to see all the builds that you can play with the spec, I will add the links for them in the description. Now let's move on to Holosmith, which is the second elite spec added for Engineer in Path of Fire expansion. Holosmith was added as a pure DPS spec, which went through lots of changes since its first version. At the moment, it is a decent DPS with builds for both power and Condi playstyles. This spec made me change my main when I came back to the game because of how much fun it was. The damage also helped a bit, but it wasn't the best DPS at that time anyway. Now, in terms of how complex it is to play, well, you should be prepared to press a lot of skills, because regardless if you play the power or Condi builds, you need to switch a lot of kits, in addition to the class mechanic, which is the Photon Forge. I think this build can feel a bit like Weaver switching between attunements, but not as squishy. And speaking about the class mechanic, the Photon Forge is a new state that you enter to do increased damage and have access to 5 new skills for a limited time. Because the more you stay in this state, the more hit you gain, which depending on the build can affect you in different ways. You should adjust your playstyle according to the build. As for the weapons, Holosmith gets access to Sword, which is best used in power builds, because the Condi version still uses double pistols. And if you have Secrets of the Obscure, you also have access to the short bow, but that will be a downgrade for any version in terms of DPS. And the builds viable for this spec will also be in the description. And time for the final elite spec, Mechanist. Mech was added with End of Dragons expansion and it quickly became a favorite for everyone maining engineer, and whoever didn't play switched to it. And the reason was simple. The DPS was good, support was easy with either heal or DPS builds, and you could also play it as a Condi variant. But Mech started being nerfed almost every patch as it was kinda overperforming a bit. But do not worry, Mech is still great, maybe not as much with the DPS build, but because of how simple it is to get into it, it is one of my favorites. Mechanist, as the name suggests, drops the tool belt for a mech port, which is what rangers wanted all along. A dependable pet which can tank for you, but it is not overpowered, and it also generates boons. For the build, as mentioned earlier, you can play as a Condi DPS and also have some range when needed. Power DPS is also okay, but doesn't do that much damage. Then you can also play it as a support and provide alacrity with it. And it is a lot simpler to do compared to scrappers. As for the weapons, Mechanist gains access to mace in main hand, which is a very good support weapon. One that is used on scrapper too, but you can also use the short bow if you have access to Secrets of the Obscure. It's not the best, but it has more healing output compared to mace and shield. And in regards to the builds, this one has even more than Scrapper, so I will put them all in the description. In conclusion, Engineer is a very good class for both DPS and support. The journey to level 80 is not that great, or if you plan to play core Engie. But everything after that, and with all the elite specs, it is very fun and I really enjoyed getting back to it. As for the bad part, the short bow doesn't add much to the class, and you will be using the old arsenal more. Especially if you do not like heal builds, but if that's not a problem for you, then this class is a great choice. If you want to see more content like this, please let me know in the comment section below, and if you enjoyed the video, please click the like and subscribe buttons.